little pyramid with 85% of spectators, 10% of participants, and 5% of creators. So I assume most of the people here in this room are creators, and we're going to be mostly talking about the 10% of participants who are kind of ready. Who are these people who actively participate, and how to understand them? What do they like, what don't they like, and also are there any tools to actually measure this kind of participation? So we're going to be asking questions and hopefully give a few answers. So starting with myself, so my name is Mathias Noschis. I'm what Euromage people would call Euro pudding. I'm actually half Swiss, half Finnish. I went to university in Italy and then worked in Switzerland, Germany, UK, Georgia, and Spain. At the moment I'm living in Berlin, actually. Basically my background is in independent film. I worked for the National Film Fund in Switzerland and then for the small organization that supports filmmaking in Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. After that, I moved to London and I went to work in an advertising and branding agency. So I very much moved to the other side, the very kind of commercial side of the business. And I also worked in an online PR agency, doing online PR and social media campaigns for a lot of big Hollywood films, such as Toy Story 3, Black Swan, Gulliver's Travels, things like that. And after a while doing this, I considered that that time of my life was a little bit when I was sleeping with the enemy, because the films I love are the small, independent European films. So I decided I wanted to start my own company and try and actually use that knowledge I had from the big Hollywood films to actually apply it on smaller independent films, which are the films I love. So that's how I started my own company, and now I work as a film marketer. Independent film marketer, working mostly with producers and a few distributors, doing actually marketing campaigns, trying to make them as creative as possible. But today I'm here because I'm doing a research project for the Stockholm Academy of Dramatic Arts with Josephine here. And we're actually doing this with this idea to partner together because we have quite different profiles and different experiences, and we're coming from different backgrounds, to really kind of focus a lot on understand a little bit more this whole area of transmedia, which is quite new for me as well, and understand a little bit how the audience behaves in this kind of project.
My name is Josephine Rydberg Liden. I'm Swedish and I live in Sweden. I work regionally north of Stockholm with strategic cross-media and film development. I also teach transmedia course at SADA, where we're doing this research study. I'm also a proud LARPer, according to this presentation. What really makes, if you come from a linear storytelling background, which I'm assuming that a lot of you do, what really changes the game is the participation. That really changes how we tell stories. And we have decided to kind of dive in the deep end and look at some really heavy participation. And then with this study, we're going to move on to different kinds of participation. But we are in the early stages yet. So most of the examples we'll be talking about today is about, you know, very immersed participatory experiences, such as, for instance, LARPs. I'm very glad that you introduced the subject, Michelle, so that I know that you're a little familiar with it. So the project is a two-stage project. We are looking into why participators do participate and trying to get a sense of how that knowledge can be used when creating new stories and new projects. One of the instigating moments for this was I was writing about a transmedia experience called The Truth About America. This was made, I think it's now 6 or 7 years ago. It was a Swedish television series, a drama television series. There was a hoax debate program around it. It was about the disappearance of a woman called Marika. And they built on a real life experience on this, where Marika traveled around Sweden. She was undercover and people could help her out. There was a secret society, there were clues hidden. You could find the clues, you could follow a trail via QR codes, you could collaborate on forums, etc. It was a very new thing at the time. It was a huge experiment. And when I interviewed SVT, the public broadcaster, about it, they said that they weren't going to do it again because, according to their measurements, they didn't get very many viewers. And I was kind of shocked, because television knows how to get the viewers, and if that's what you're aiming for, then why do this kind of experiment? Surely this experiment has a different nature, so you have to measure it some way that's different. There has to be different ways to value and to measure a participatory experience. You can't just count the eyeballs on the screen, which was at the time the only thing they had done. So that was a frustration to me, and I decided to look into it a bit further, and that's what we're doing today. I think it's a huge divide between a passive and an active audience, and you need to talk to them in different ways. Right, moving on. So I'm going to talk for the first part, and my first part is divided into two parts, where I'm going to talk about the research first, and then some more practical advice around that. And then Mathias is taking over to talk about statistics and social media monitoring. So we are trying to dig into the participants' heads and understand some of that experience, what triggers them to participate, what the rewards are for them to take part in an experience like that. And we find that there is definitely a resistance to get people to be active. We call it the lean back and the lean forwards experience. The lean back is when you sit passively and watch something, and the lean forwards is when you engage and take part. And getting someone to lean forwards when they're expecting something passive is difficult.
Can I maybe just add a couple of words about the methodology? Basically, our research is based on interviews, so we have identified a few participatory experiences. So that means it can be live action role plays where people were actively, physically going into a place where they were actually playing together characters, similar to what Michelle was telling us about Tournée. Or it can also be participatory experiences where people are online and they're actively kind of participating in building a story. So basically what we wanted was only to find experiences that have some kind of TV or film element in them, but that also have a strong participation aspect, and not only people a little bit saying what they think about this or that character, but where they actively take part in the storytelling. And so we're interviewing quite a lot of people to really understand how they feel, and these are the findings that we found.
So one part of the impact that we find is that the sense of bonding is very strong in a community, especially in a LARP. What the rewards are for most people is the relationships between other people taking part. Also the relationship between them and the storyteller. Like Michelle was saying, the most rewarding thing is when the film talks back to you. That's like the ultimate impact, and that's what stays with a lot of the people after the fact. There is resistance to taking part. And most of the resistance is about social embarrassment. It's embarrassing to stand up and say something. It's embarrassing. You expose yourself, basically. You're taking a bit of a social risk. So if you can reduce the risk and make people look good while doing it, that really helps getting people involved. Also, you have to differentiate between different participants. People who have done it before will have other needs. They will have different motivations for taking part again. They will be much more inclined to push boundaries. People who are taking part for the first time, they need much more reassurance. They need clear boundaries. They worry that they're doing things wrong, and they want to know that they're fulfilling yours and the other participants' expectations. And also the exit, the end point of the game. This is something that's very often neglected in online campaigns, but if you get it right, you can turn the participants into ambassadors for your next thing. So this is a very important part of your project to really look after and to really design for, which is difficult because by the end of it, everybody's exhausted and just really happy that everything went well and nobody died. But try and think ahead. And with the exit strategies, it's important to act at the very end point, because the impact we find in research is at the very peak at the end of it, because there's a certain nostalgia, everybody's partying, saying goodbye to each other, and that's where they're the most inclined to want to reconnect. So, we're going into more about what this means for creators. The results that we have found can be, we hope, turned into some practical advice. We're assuming that what you want with a participatory audience is to get them involved, get them hooked, get them to travel down the rabbit hole into your experience. And once they're there, you want them to be entertained, you want them to enjoy and get the most out of it. And once they've left, you want them to talk about it and recruit new participator and recruit the new audience. So the impact, it's all about how you facilitate and customize the interaction and the opportunities to interact. We find that in participatory experience, most of the impact happens on an interpersonal level, from LARPer to LARPer, say. And this is something that you can have in mind while designing. Even beforehand, make sure that you enable communication on many different levels, as in a group forum, as a person-to-person message, as from one person to a wider audience. The example of this is from a LARP I was taking part in March. It's a LARP taking part in a sci-fi, it's happening in a sci-fi universe called Battlestar Galactica. I don't know if you're familiar with the series. Battlestar Galactica has a huge fan base, especially in the United States. And it's a universe that many people are familiar with, and those of us who weren't just had to do our homework and watch a few episodes before we took part. And the sense of communication between characters in this LARP was very, very well designed. So for instance, these people are part of a team of pilots. So they were acquainted with each other in an online forum before the LARP started. So they could all exchange ideas for intrigues, for sympathies and enemies, and so on. And you could also communicate person to person. These were the very tragic lovers in the LARP. They died in the end. It was very sad. And this is another Josephine. This is her Facebook page now. So they provided lots and lots of channels for communication and also material to communicate with. They made it very easy to have your photo in character made public anywhere. So when we talk to our interview victims, it's interesting that they have a resistance to it and they're not really admitting that it had an impact on them. So we have to kind of circumvent that a little bit and ask the right questions. And one of the ways to get around the resistance is to make it useful. I know that when you designed the spiral, there was a LARPing experience around that, especially aimed at creators and artists. And many of the artists that took part used that as an excuse for promoting their own brand. So it wasn't just play, it was work as well. So that gave them an excuse to take part. Some people don't have a resistance at all into participating. I know it's really warm in here. I know you just had a break, so I'm hoping your blood sugar levels are up. But we prepared a little song and dance to keep you entertained. Participatory experience can be full of willing idiots. Here we go.
I don't know where, so I made up my mind, you must come to the end. Look at me now, will I ever learn? I don't know how.
But no, basically the thing is, if you had told me, we went to the ABBA museum a month ago in Stockholm, and if you had told me I would end up on stage singing in front of a lot of people, I would have never guessed, because my resistance is too strong to do these kind of things.
Mine isn't.
But they had organized the experience in a way that you had someone, they were building the experience little by little. You had someone encouraging you to go on stage. You had someone, pushing you. They were like, oh, I can take a picture of you. When we were talking about Facebook, you want to have your picture on Facebook, you're staging your life. You knew you could download this video. You could show it to your friends. So basically, they had, in a genius way, kind of built the whole experience in order to get your resistance level down and to not be afraid of being ridiculed in front of a lot of people.
I can recommend that experience heartily to all of you. While in Stockholm, go and sing with ABBA. So, as I was saying before, the expectations and the needs for the users are different. If they've done it before, they will be expecting a challenge. That's why they're in there. They're the junkies, they're the people who want new kicks. So they'll be much more inclined to test the extreme, they'll be much more inclined to put themselves at risk. Whereas the newbies, of course, will not. They will want to be able to limit their participation as much as possible. And also have, a safety vent somewhere, so they know they can exit whenever they feel it's all getting a bit too much. Like in the submarine experience, 5 people had to leave. Also, newbies and oldies will be wanting to spend different amounts of time, and they're also, the oldies, they know all the tricks already. This is an example from the Daybreak series. It was a web series created by Tim Crane, and it had a huge interactive component. It wasn't a LARP, it was via an app, but it kind of created a global community of people who used this app called the Jackboxer app. And basically the Jackboxer community is a bit like the wannabe anonymous, the wannabe truth finders. But not all of us are geeky enough to be very efficient at being anonymous lookalikes or whatever. So they created an app that made it very, very easy to break codes, to follow trails, to decipher messages. And you could go down the hard route if you were more hardcore and wanted to actually break your own ciphers. So that's one way of designing different levels with different levels of challenges. With the exit strategy, it's very important to anticipate that endpoint because you can really use that to your advantage. The emotional and psychological impact of the experience peaks right after it's finished, and then it fades after a few weeks. And even though people might not actively admit that they have been influenced by such an experience, most of them will admit to having dreamt about it afterwards, and it's obvious that it's on people's minds a lot. Starrek, I don't know if you're familiar with Starrek. In the Pirkinning, Captain Pirk and his crew. It's a very low budget Finnish film. Huge effort. I don't know how many years they spent in their mother's basement doing it. It's a horrible film, honestly, but I watched it to the end, and so it has a lot of people. And the exit point for Starrek turned into this, which is Iron Sky. That's been watched by a lot of people, especially on VOD. And so by really looking after your exit points, you can create opportunities for the next step. Right?
All right.
I'm handing this over now. There you go.
The remote. Yeah, so actually what we've just seen is basically findings that we have kind of seen that tend to apply to any participatory experience. Then obviously, as we were presenting a little bit earlier, every participatory experience can be very different, and if you're just making an app, if you're making a game for kids, if you're making a guerrilla marketing campaign, they can be very different. And so now what we're trying to do is to give you a few tools on how to actually know your audience, the audience for your own experience, actually, because we think that's, every experience will have a different audience, so it's very important to know it. And in order to do that, we're going to start by seeing a little bit social media monitoring. So, what is social media monitoring? Social media monitoring is used quite a lot by Hollywood studios when they're distributing their film. I used to do that quite a lot for Warner Brothers first, and then for 20th Century Fox. Basically, the idea is that you use social media to understand what people are thinking about a specific film by monitoring all the comments on Twitter, on Facebook, on blogs, and by really kind of understanding what people like, what people are interested in, what they're not interested in. They mostly do that before the release of the film because, Hollywood studios, they don't really care what people think about their film, they care about how much money they can make. So what they're interested in is to see how well their publicity campaign is working, what is successful, what is not successful, so that for the next campaign, they can a little bit improve the tools. And I'm going to be showing you the type of analysis you can do. So what's the methodology? The methodology is that you select for every territory a list of websites that you consider are the most important and representative websites from that territory. You can't monitor the whole of internet because internet is too deep and too big. And so you choose this certain amount of websites, you choose the time frame that you want to analyze, and then basically you define the categories that you're interested in. For example, if you're making a film for kids, you might be more interested in analyzing kids' websites. Or if you are interested in a specific film where, an actor, they have changed the main actor, then you might be interested in knowing what people think about that specific topic. And then you actually start doing work, which means just going online once a week and collecting every single comment that has been published on that film, on those websites, and on social media to actually do statistical analysis. Now, what is the result? I'm going to show you one example. This is a fantastic action comedy called This Means War with Reese Witherspoon and, doesn't really matter. Anyway, it was released by 20th Century Fox a year ago in Italy, and I did social media monitoring for them. Basically, this was what you see, the chart behind me is 6 months leading to the release of the film. We had to analyze every single article that was published about that film to see on which website it was published, how many articles were published. And so as you can see, there are some peaks, for example. Well, I don't have a pointer, but for example, at the end of January, you have a peak. That's when the Italian trailer was published. Or, you know, at the, that's when the film was released in the US. Or at the week 4 of November when the Italian trailer was published. So this is kind of the first part of monitoring. And then you go into more of the comments and user comments. And so you do the same analysis week by week, but instead of looking at the articles that were published, you look at the comments that were published. And as you can see, like, it more or less corresponds to the same peaks as in the editorial coverage. And the idea here is that for every comment we analyze whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. Neutral means neutral comment, for example, when is the film being released? Or it can also mean partly positive, partly negative. And in that case, that you would consider the comment to be neutral. And as you can see, in general, towards the end of the campaign, mostly positive comments, beforehand quite a lot of negative comments, in particular in week 4 of November, because the Italian title had just been set, and it was a horrible title, so a lot of people were commenting saying that it was a really bad title, so then thanks to this kind of analysis, they decided to actually change the title. So this type of monitoring is used, and for example, I have one example, every Harry Potter film that was released, obviously they would do a lot of this type of monitoring in all major European territories. And I remember the first of the last Harry Potter film is in 2 films, and the first one was supposed to be released in 3D, but they added the 3D in post-production. Anyway, there were every week 85% of negative comments about this 3D of Harry Potter. So when Warner was getting these reports every week and they realized how bad the buzz was, they actually decided to actually release the film in 2D and to only release the last film in 3D. So, you know, this kind of monitoring has a real impact on their distribution strategies. So back to, this means war, then you can also have a cross-analysis, which means like you look at the topic of the comments and then you look whether they were positive or negative. So for example, in this case, you can see the local aspects, which is the one, I hope you can read. Yeah, you can read. Local aspects is purely red, so that means that it's very negative. So that was because of the very bad title. Whereas the reviews, which is the last column, were purely positive. So you know, this type, why am I showing you this? Because this is used a lot by Hollywood studios, but it can be used by anyone. And when you're creating a participatory experience, or when you're creating any kind of experience for an audience, you can actually do this type of analysis, even if it's a small market, even if you don't have that much money. Obviously, maybe you can't do 6 months of analysis, but you can still do a little bit of analysis in some key moments to see what people are saying. And so this is now what we're trying to do is to suggest you a few ways of using this type of measurement to actually understand not only how many people are watching or participating or whatever, but also what these people are saying and where the impact is happening. So back to the slide we saw earlier, again, we're assuming that the creator, what they're trying to do is you know, there are 3 moments basically before your experience, before the experience is made public. You're trying to get participants involved and know them better. Once during the experience, after the release of the event or the experience, you're trying to get them entertained, and then afterwards you're trying to then get them to recruit. So that's again kind of the basics of our reasoning for the next few slides. So basically, with possible participants, why would social media monitoring be useful? Well, it's a very good tool to get actually to know your participants. And you know, you can identify keywords, like to understand, we're talking earlier, Domenico was talking about communities, you know, like there are a lot of communities online. Well, understand who these communities are, what their rules are, what they talk about, what they're interested in. You know, what do they have, are there some leaders within these communities? Are they, you know, how do people react, how do people enter into those communities? All these kind of questions are really relevant because they will really help you to actually, once you start recruiting for your experience, to well, for your whatever, for whatever you're creating, it's really useful because it helps to kind of get the people in the right way to kind of come with you into this experience, and also to break the resistance that Joe was talking about. So as an example, this is basically maybe some people know this group. They are called the Femen, the Ukrainian feminist group, and they do a lot of quite mediatic activities. And basically this is for a film, that's a documentary film about these women, and together with the producer we did a crowdfunding campaign to try and get financing for the film. And these kind of films work very well for crowdfunding because, you know, there are people who are actually interested in these kind of topics. So what did we do? We identified a few keywords. That was feminism, Ukraine, Russia, Pussy Riot, because it was at the time when the Pussy Riots had been jailed and stuff like that. And we kind of really analyzed, you know, who are these people? How are they talking? Where are they talking? Where are the forums where they're talking? What are they talking about? How do feminists talk about? And once we did that for a few days, then we decided to actually get involved in this conversation and to kind of, you know, start talking to these people. And doing this kind of analysis and really understanding the little rules of these communities really also helped us to kind of identify new communities. For example, we hadn't thought about the anti-feminist, but obviously when you're making a film about something like that, some people love to hate, so they will probably be very active criticizing this. And you know, doing this kind of analysis can be really useful. Once again, yeah, to understand this audience, and in this case, to start engaging with them. And actually, the crowdfunding campaign was relatively successful, and we managed to get 12,000 euros, which I know maybe doesn't sound great, but for us it was an amazing achievement. Now, once the experience has started, why would you do some monitoring? Well, monitoring can help you to take the temperature, to understand what people like, what people don't like in the experience, what's working, what's not working. You'd be surprised, you know, earlier we were talking about newbies and oldies. Well, maybe what are newbies saying? What are oldies saying? What, you know, what are experienced participants? How are people reacting to what is happening in your experience? All these questions can find answers, and you know, if you have an event that's very long and that's over a period of 1 year or something like that, you don't need to go week by week. Maybe you can just identify the key moments, and there, just go on social media, go on the forums, go on the platforms, wherever your participants are, and see what they say. And as an example, the image is horrendous, but the example is good. Actually, this is a film. Again, it's a film. Well, I work in film marketing, so that's why the examples are quite a lot from film. But it's a Swiss comedy about these quite stupid people who actually steal a lot of cannabis and then take it around a region in Switzerland. And so we decided, in order to engage the audience, to organize a geocaching competition and activities. What is geocaching? It is actually using a GPS to actually go and find some secret things that are hidden in different places. So there is already an existing geocaching community in Switzerland, in particular in that region, but we decided we wanted to make it a little bigger and obviously put a few elements from the film into this geocaching, and also organize a big competition to actually, for families to go and take part in this kind of geocaching. Why do people like geocaching? Because it's a nice way of going for a walk with their kids, but also to have an objective, you know, a goal. So you're not only walking or wandering in the Alps, you're also actually trying to do something. So what did we do for this? The geocaching, we're talking about an event that will take place next year. So at the moment, this is just a plan. You know, I don't have results so far. But the idea is that we have, you know, it will go on for like 3 months. So we have identified the end of the competition, the first month, like several moments when we will be doing social media monitoring, going on the existing forums to really see what people are saying. We have like a 3-stage plan, you know, with the idea that at every stage, depending on what people are saying, depending on how people are reacting to the experience, we can adapt the experience a little bit and maybe insist on a few. If we see that some of the geocaches are not popular at all, maybe we're not going to insist on those anymore. Or if we see that the geocaching community is reacting in quite a negative way to the competition, which is one of our concerns, then we're probably going to have to give more rewards to the proper geocachers to make sure that they stay with us in the experience. So, you know, we will really use this monitoring to understand, to get a little bit of a pulse of our community. And then once it's over, so, you know, the former participants, this is what Joe was saying, you know, don't forget them. And too often, you just tend to think, oh, okay, I'm done with my thing, and bye-bye. Whereas actually, this is a new community to get engaged. And so, you know, in particular, when we talk about monitoring, well, what can you monitor? You can monitor people's reactions, so you can know what worked and what didn't work. Because I think so often, in particular, when we talk about transmedia and we talk about these type of participatory experiences, people don't really set themselves goals. You know, they just kind of hope that people will like it, but they don't really know what they're expecting. And we believe that it's really important that you kind of have some type of expectations. And so this monitoring the reactions at the end of the experience is a way to actually understand what people thought about your experience and what to do differently the next time. And then the other thing is also to get, you know, to hook them for your next experience, because they will be the initial community for your next experience. And so as an example, this is a kids film I'm working on called Shana. And it's about a girl in Canada who is, a family film. The producer wants me to call it a family film. It's a family film. But it's mostly targeted at kids who are 8 to 12. It's about this girl in Canada who has like a special relationship with a wolf. And so the activity we're going to be doing, promoting the film, it's going to be released in September, is guerrilla marketing campaigns. We're going to be putting stickers, and now that Michelle has suggested to actually handwrite them, we might actually handwrite them around schools, saying, what is your secret animal? And using a few cool logos of secret animals. Spirit animal. And then people can go online, these kids can go online and take a test, and depending on the test, they get a different animal. So some of them are wolf, some others are a bear, some others can be a leopard, and then depending on that, then you get sent to you via email some little logos that you can stick, you know, to your rucksack, that you can put in your books. So the idea is to create these kind of little communities. What we get, this is quite a short activity. So the idea is that it works for a week. You know, kids, they get bored. So we don't want them to be like the team leopard for the rest of their life. But if they do it for a week, it's great. And so basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing it only in a few schools first to actually test how it's going. And at the end, we're going to be monitoring the results. And if there is one animal that people love, everyone wants to be a leopard, everyone wants to be a wolf, then we're going to make it much harder to become a wolf. So people will do the test again and again and again, so they can become a wolf. And also we're going to be seeing if there are some leaders that have appeared within these communities, and they will become, for our next stage, which is the release of the film, they will become our brand ambassadors for the film. So, you know, we really kind of not seeing this as an activity as such, and then that's it, and we abandon them there. Once we finish the activity, this is when it becomes really important for us, and this is when we can actually really involve them. So, now, if you were to remember one thing from this presentation, I think this is what's the most important for us, is that when, you know, if there are ways to measure the impact that your experiences have on your audience, and too often people are just, because they're already pioneers, and it's already so much work to actually create new kind of experiences, that you tend to kind of forget the whole thing afterwards. Whereas what we think is really important is for you to set yourself some goals. then you might get them completely wrong, because we are in a new area where you don't have set rules. You know, when we talk about box office, it's quite easy, or ratings in TV, it's quite easy because there have been millions of films before. So you know, I want to do better than that film, but I want to do less than this film. Whereas in this case, you don't really have these benchmarks, so you have to set your own benchmarks, and you have to say, well, I want 85% of satisfaction, I want at least 1,000 comments on Twitter, I want, at least that many comments that talk about this topic, I want people to be really focused on that. Maybe you're going to be completely wrong. It doesn't matter, I'm not saying that you need to set these goals for your finances. Set them for yourself, so at least at the end you can say, oh, this went wrong, this went wrong, this went wrong, so next time I'm going to learn, and little by little, and possibly share that with the community, because then it can be useful for other people as well. And little by little, we might be able to actually set some new rules for ratings, but not only ratings in terms of eyeballs, as Joe was saying, but also in terms of impact and how deep these kind of experiences go into you. So that's it. If there are any questions, talking about this presentation, it will be available. I wanted to upload it, but I forgot. If you want the presentation, it will be available on this URL, alphabattle.com/Vilnius. And here is our contact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathias. Thank you, Joe. Anybody in the audience have a question for him? Besides, what's for lunch? Anybody?
You're talking about the challenge with tracking performance. Does this make a difference? There are not many eyeballs in this project. Is it worth the money? Well, the hard question with this is, when we're talking about culturally funded projects, or public service television, then of course it makes a lot of sense to look at the impact in the person and not on the number of persons viewing it, so to speak. But in commercial channels, does it make sense at all to talk about impact?
I think it does, because I think it will also teach us something about how much people are willing to risk, how much people are willing to be ambassadors for the next thing. So if we're going to find good business models for transmedia, we need to know what it does, how it affects people. So that's the theory that we have, that impact and knowing the nature of impact is important, because it'll help us build better business models as well, even commercial ones.
So the worth of deep impact in individual persons who act as ambassadors is basically promotion.
No.
No.
I think if you want to monetize any type of experience, so you talk about commercial transmedia, which I still need to really see where it is, because I'm not sure I really have seen it so far. But if you want to monetize some kind of experiences, then obviously the fact that it can touch, the fact that you can also prove afterwards. For example, if you have, let's say something very simple, you have adverts before, like a video within your transmedia IP. If you can prove in some way that people who are watching these videos were real fans of these kind of videos, that 12% of them went to comment on the video on Twitter and stuff like that, obviously you can monetize that in a slightly different way than if you just say we had that many viewers. Because you can ask actually for a little bit more money than people who actually see that in the corner of their web browsers without actually kind of caring about it. So I think there can be an impact. But advertising agencies have been trying to actually measure the impact for 50 years. So we don't pretend that we will come up with a solution. We're just asking questions more than answering them.
Everybody's talking about metrics, and I think it started a couple of years ago in Canada really intensely for Europe, looking at the metrics about who really uses what you do. Because in most transmedia productions, people have the big experience at the end. So for the 5% who stayed the whole experience, they used 80% of the budget. So that's why we start doing it differently, modular structures instead, launching testing, but also looking at metrics. My only concern with metrics and basing any solutions on them is we did that with mobile gaming. Hence, was it back in the start 2000 when we started doing mobile gaming, and we got a lot of metrics from Korea and in general from other parts of the world to tell us about people's behavior. The big difference was that their infrastructure is different, so they travel a lot. So their usage was during travel times, and hence when you did some of the first testing on kids' usage of games, it was actually in the evening. So when the TVs turn off, the computers turn off, and if you're doing an experience, it's always situational. So it's where are people right now, right there. So if you create a game and you think they use it during the day, but they do it in the evening, you're going to do a wrong experience. So I completely agree with the matrix. I just say, I never base anything on other projects that's culturally different, demographic, fan base. You have to do it for each project because else you're going to design wrong from the start.
You have to set your own benchmarks, basically, and you have to get to know your own audience to know how to measure it and to know what that measurement means.
Any other question? No? If not, thank you, Mathias. Thank you, Joe.